Mother's Day is coming up, and it can be a time of celebration or a time of sadness. For some women who long to be mothers, the cheery Instagram announcements and Facebook photos are painful reminders of dashed hopes. But LA Times' Jessica Roy has discovered some online networks to help ease the struggle. Thanks for coming in, Jessica.
Thank you for having me.
Tell everybody how common this is.
It's actually 1 in 8 couples will be diagnosed with infertility, which is going 12 months of trying to get pregnant without getting pregnant and keeping the pregnancy.
And social media then is become sort of a curse and then a blessing, right? So let's talk about the curse first. You know, you're trying to get pregnant. People are saying, when are you going to have that baby? And every time you open up Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, there all those babies are. And how does that leave people feeling? What did you hear?
You know, I interviewed Megan Edwards-Collins, who's a professor of occupational therapy at Winston-Salem University, who did a study on how it affects women in their day-to-day lives. And she said it is just all-consuming, and that social media makes it even more like you can't escape it. It's like a nonstop celebration of everyone else's fertility when it's something that you want so much.
And people really don't know what to say, right? There are people who make jokes about it, like, oh, you can have one of my kids, and it's not helpful.
Right, yeah, a lot of people just don't know how to respond. So few people talk about it that when you do talk about it, nobody really knows what to say. And it's something that comes at the intersection of so many other taboos. You know, you're talking about sex, you're talking about family planning choices, you're talking about medicine, you're talking about money. Those are all things that on their own are hard to talk about, and this is really at the intersection of all of them. It's people, yeah, just don't know what to say and can come off dismissive or unsympathetic.
A couple of the women you talked to said, you know, look, it's depression, it's anxiety, it's like you said, it's all I think about all day long. It's also incredibly expensive, right? How much does it cost now?
A round of IVF in California costs $15,000 to $25,000.
Wow, and most people don't do it just once, right?
Yes, for the average woman, it'll take 2 attempts, but that means for half, it'll take more.
And is that insured?
In California, there's no mandate for insurers to cover right now. And so for many women, no, it's not covered. There is a bill that's proposed in the California legislature right now that would mandate insurance coverage for IVF.
Social media has sort of answered the call. As much as it's a curse, it's also a blessing. Tell us what's out there for people now.
There's so much out there. There's an Instagram community where people use the hashtag TTC for trying to conceive, where they talk about what the treatment they're going through, how they're feeling, what they're doing that day. On Facebook, there are a lot of what are known as groups, like private groups, where women can talk about their treatment, all those topics. And really get a lot of advice, too. They can say, my doctor's suggesting this. Has anyone else gone through it? We're going to try Clomid. We're going to try a medicated cycle. We're going to move to IVF. What advice do you have? What doctors do you recommend? And really get a lot of that information in a way that they couldn't a generation ago.
And Reddit, too, right?
Yeah, there are tons of what are known as subreddits, so the little subforums. There are ones for trying for a baby for women who are just starting. There's still trying for women who are maybe a year or two in, and then there's our infertility for women who are actively, and people, you know, all couples and men and non-binary people are all welcome there, people who are actively going through treatment.
And is there also support for folks on social media platforms about the emotions that they're dealing with their partner, if they happen to have a partner that they're going through this process with? Because I know that it's a real strain on the other person who's not getting injected.
There are resources out there for men, I think fewer than there are for women, but I wish there were more for men, because in half of infertility cases, the man is sort of, you know, the issue, and there's really not as much support as there could be for them.
You talked to this woman named Elise Ash, and she decided to get active about it. Tell us her story.
Elise was trying to get pregnant, wasn't happening as fast as she thought it should. She went to a yoga fertility class at her local yoga studio, and her and the women there put together a Facebook group where they could keep in touch and talk about, you know, where they were in their sort of, they call it your infertility journey. And she said part of the problem was that all these other women started getting pregnant. They had their first and then they had their second. She said, I felt like the slowest kid in gym class, that they were getting so far ahead of me. And so she set up a program called Fruitful Fertility, where she pairs people, women, men, whoever, with a mentor who's already completed their infertility journey. So somebody who is done seeking treatment at this point, whether they had a baby or they adopted or whether they decided not to have children, someone where you don't feel like you're competing with them, and when you're not going to call them up and say, I'm having a tough day, and they're going to go, guess what, I'm pregnant again.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You know, it's funny, you made a little joke there. There was a funny podcast that came of this, right? IVFML.
Yes.
Tell us what that is.
So Anna Almendrala was then at the Huffington Post, and she said there were so many like inadvertently hilarious, awkward or weird or funny moments that she and her husband decided to do a podcast where they talked about all that.
That's helpful, right? There's no
Yeah.
shame. It's more about just like, this is part of life. We're dealing. Right.
And in a lot of the groups online, yeah, women talk about the little mundane things. You know, I'm going to a concert and I have a cooler in the back seat of my car with my shots in them. Or somebody talked about they knocked over the pee cup on the floor of their bathroom doing their test that day. Like, just a lot of, like little funny moments that maybe you wouldn't publicly post about on Facebook.
Better to laugh than cry.
Yeah.
Jessica Roy, thank you so much. Jessica's story, Infertility is Hard to Talk About, can be found at latimes.com.